Imagine creating your very own passion project. Imagine investing hours each day towards it, putting as much effort into it as humanly possible. You would need a lot of willpower to keep yourself disciplined to ensure it was finally completed. Now imagine finishing the project a whole year later and then forgetting about it forever. That scenario happened to me a few years ago when I tried to create an ambitious map pack for my favourite game to create levels for. In this episode, I will be talking about how I undertook a large mapping project, why I started it, how I kept motivation, and what became of the biggest Black Mesa map pack that has never been released. This is my Black Mesa mapping journey. In episode 1, I explained how I tried to create a map pack for Black Mesa called The Tank. It was a fun project to work on, and I have a lot of fond memories from mid-2016, but much like a large number of my other projects, The Tank was never finished. After I'd given up on it, I went to make CSGO maps for almost a year and was involved in 2 projects. The first was called Pretension, which was a diffuse map that I made around Christmas of 2016, and the next was called Skyscraper, a collaboration for a mapping contest, and that was created in the spring of 2017. The time between mid-2016 and mid-2017 was a time when I created very few maps, but the reason for that was that I had started making level analysis videos on this very channel. After the disaster that was Vengeance at Dusk, I tried to continue to contribute to the Run Think Shoot Live community by making these videos to help other mappers. There is a saying that goes, those who can, do, and those who can't, teach. Yeah, that sounds about right. One benefit to making the level design analysis videos on my channel was that I was able to see how other mappers approached level design and detailing. This helped me to improve my mapping ability and was a big reason why my levels went from looking like this to looking like this. Anyway, in July of 2017, the map Skyscraper had been completed by the Cat of War, Azino Ezel, and myself. And in the contest, we came second, out of 2. No, I think there were more than that, but not a whole lot more. I was really happy with making videos on my channel at that point, and wanted to expand into new styles of videos. One day in July, I had an idea, given to me through divine inspiration or something like that. I would make a dummy example level that included a number of good level design principles and then make a video showing and explaining the map. This sounded like a decent idea and one that could not go far wrong. It would mean that I could create a level that could be admired and that would help others in learning about mapping, whilst I didn't need to upload it to the workshop and it would not get brought under the same scrutiny as publicly released maps. At the time, this seems reasonable, so I got to work planning. The level could have been made in Half-Life 2 Episode 2, as most of the content covered on my channel was based around that game, but there was something about Black Mesa that seemed to be more appealing. Maybe it was the previous experience that I had in Black Mesa and the fond, and not so fond memories of it. I decided to create an environment similar to that of Office Complex because it seemed to be an easy theme to imitate. The level would also include parts of other themes such as apprehension and questionable ethics, and the level would occur around a circular loop. I made it so the start of the map involved walking out of an elevator to see another elevator behind locked doors that would need to be reached to finish the level. The design principle that I was trying to teach here was to make the goal or objective clear and simple so the player can understand what they are working towards. Throughout July, I worked hard to get this map completed, and there was a drop in content on my YouTube channel. I took the same approach that I took when making the tank, and blocked out the entire level first, but added the main textures along the way. There were many unique scenarios in the map, a ceiling turret encounter that included parkour, a conveniently placed laser for breaking a vent, a G-Man sighting, and my personal favourite, a tram that had to be jumped on that would carry the player to another area. By the standards I hold today, the map was not well designed, but looking back on it, some of the ideas and concepts were quite imaginative. The map was finished at the beginning of August 2017. The title for the map that was chosen was Complex Office, and I began preparations to make a video to post to my channel. But wait, making that map seemed rather easy. Too easy in fact. Maybe, just maybe, I could create another map to go along with Complex Office and then string them together to make a longer example project for the video. Maybe the map could be in a different style so the video I was making could cover many different level design scenarios. This idea was great and definitely wasn't going to alter the course of the next year and tie me down to creating far more than I had initially intended, right? Over the next month, I created a new level for the video that I was hoping to make for my channel. When designing, I knew there had to be something unique that would set it apart from Complex Office and that would also make it useful for other mappers. One idea that really stuck out was creating an escape level. As an example, take the start of Half-Life 2. The start of the game is possibly my favourite part. It consists of a section where you're looking around and exploring the environment, and then a section where you're running from the Metro Police. It is a moment in the Half-Life series that mappers might want to replicate, and I have seen scenarios like it in a number of custom maps. All I had to do was create a map in which the player did a bit of exploring, and then a bit of running, and then that could be added alongside Complex Office for the video. Work on this second map took far longer than the first, spanning over a month. The setting that was chosen was slightly more complicated, with the main environment being similar to We've Got Hostiles, but there were also parts of Apprehension and Blast Pit that were imitated. I spent a lot of time looking at the Black Mesa maps to try and replicate the feel of them in order to make the map look like it belonged in the actual game. The map begins with exploration that shows the aftermath of the Resonance Cascade in full force. Soldiers and Vortigaunts can be seen battling each other. Scientists can be seen being devoured by zombies. The reason why I created this section for the map was to help teach other mappers to try and add more to the environment that does not directly relate to the player. By adding NPCs interacting with each other, it helps to make the level feel alive and makes it more like a believable scenario instead of just having combat where enemies spawn in immediately knowing where the player is. One of the purposes of point insertion is to showcase the citizens living their normal lives to really immerse the player into the world. You can see citizens getting arrested, getting their food rations, and hanging about talking to each other. I personally don't like the way that this feeling of being part of an already existing world changes in Half-Life 2, and Gordon Freeman very quickly becomes a messianic figurehead. The illusion of the immersive world is broken, and eventually, every action that takes place in the world seems to revolve around you, and every NPC quickly knows who you are.
We hope for one more fighter to help storm that barricade. We never guessed it would be you.
Anyway, I digress. Much like in point insertion, I included a chase and escape sequence to my Black Mesa level where the player would be spotted by the HECU and then have to run to safety as soldiers came from every direction to put pressure on the player. Overall, the map wasn't bad, although there are many things that I would change about it today, like cutting down on the time exploring in favour of more action. One thing I have learned is that players will lose patience if exploration parts go on too long. Sometime in September 2017, the map was finished, so now I had 2 dummy example maps that I could use for the video I was making. I now just needed to join them together. That wouldn't take long, as I already knew how to do this from my last Black Mesa project. As I mentioned, the new level was based on the gameplay flow of the first chapter of Half-Life 2, and like Complex Office, it ended with an elevator, so it made sense to put that map first and then have an easy elevator transition to Complex Office. That is exactly what I did, so now the second level came first, and that would act as an introduction, and then the office level was the main gameplay map. At this stage, it would have been a great time to make that video that I keep going on about, but I looked at the bigger picture. I had 2 maps already, both were relatively easy to make, and alongside that, both were actually fun and enjoyable. Why not add a final level after Complex Office to round the whole thing off, and then I would have a full map pack. At this point, I found a lot more confidence in the 2 levels I had made and also in my mapping ability, enough to decide to scrap the video and make this into a map pack that would be released to the public on the Steam Workshop. I would still make a developer commentary, but the primary purpose for making it was now for others to play. From that moment onward, the project became known as Black Mesa Flatline. The name was chosen for no other reason than because it sounded cool. I realised that the map pack in its current state was lacking in a plotline. I have always liked to have some kind of unique premise in my projects, as I was never a fan of just setting the map within the base game and making it just another level. I am not talking about a full AAA plotline with lots of story arcs, just something to make my levels unique. Looking back, more often than not, this has been my downfall and is usually the thing that causes the most confusion and problems in my levels. It may not be the thing that hindered Flatline's development, but it certainly contributed to its problems. The simple premise was that you would be moving through the Black Mesa research facility with your scientist friend, and they would get trapped behind a pile of rubble when an earthquake hits and the ceiling caves in.
Look out, Freeman!
Much like in Black Mesa East in Half-Life 2. In the first map, you would find your friend again in a control room, but then the HACU would appear from nowhere and take her hostage. The rest of the map pack would involve the player trying to rescue her. Yeah, this premise is just as bad as your family getting captured in Vengeance at Dusk. I wasn't overly enthusiastic about this premise, to be honest, and only came up with it because there were enough voice lines in Black Mesa for me to carry out the idea. The rest of the map pack would be a case of show, don't tell. I would put in-game TV monitors up, conveniently showing the player where the scientist was being taken and what their current situation was. Does that method of relaying information sound familiar? That's right, it's Half-Life 2 Cosmonaut, a mod I created 1 year after Flatline. In fact, I borrowed so many ideas from Flatline when making Cosmonaut that they are essentially the same thing, just one was for Black Mesa and the other for Half-Life 2 Episode 2. And there wasn't any rocket in Flatline. One inspiration when making Flatline was Bioshock. I had not played Bioshock until early 2017, but when I did, it seemed to have a similar effect on me as the Half-Life series of games did. I was blown away by the game's setting, style, music, and storytelling, and I wanted to include a lot of level design techniques from Bioshock in Flatline. One of the ways I did this was ensuring there was always something separating the player and the friendly NPCs you communicate with. This technique was used in Bioshock to make the player feel a sense of isolation, even if there is just a glass window between them and the NPC they are interacting with.
We made a business deal, you and I, did we not?
Once my strange premise was finalised, set pieces and screens were implemented into Black Mesa Flatline's 2 existing maps, and work started on the third and final map. This time, the map was to be based on surface tension. It was the first map I made with displacements as terrain, and overall, it's not a bad map. Compared with all the levels I had made before, this map was a big step up, both in gameplay and detail. It was made during autumn break, and I managed to make and detail the majority of it in a week. It had long distance HECU fights, a nice outside courtyard, and a trip mine maze, which I proceeded to copy and paste to every other Black Mesa project after this. I also implemented the final boss fight. I'm certain it was a helicopter at first, but I must have changed it to a large tank. Now, I just had to add the scientists somewhere so the player could find them and end the map pack. I had not really thought about where I would place the scientist or how they could be rescued, and the map was already growing in size. Okay, maybe I could build just one more level. In November of 2017, I made a level that was set in some underground laboratories. It was similar to Questionable Ethics in that it showed that a lot of shady stuff went on in the Black Mesa research facility and included a lot of creepy happenings like ragdolls disappearing, knocking coming from inside closets, and the world's worst jump scare. Whilst the map was fun to make, it was genuinely boring to play and only included one decent section that had good gameplay, so I abandoned that map and started working on a new level. On the 12th of December 2017, I started making a level with the same environment as Lambda Core. At the end of the third level, I made a room in which you walk in and then get knocked out from behind, much like what happens to Gordon at the end of Apprehension. You then wake up in a room that is locked and have to escape.
All I know for sure is this guy's been killing Marines.
The map included a coolant pool and an annoying teleporter sequence where one wrong mistake would take you back to the start. Actually, I'm not sure this level was very good at all. I really had lost focus on the project at this point and was only extending the length of it because of the weird story premise that I had come up with. I eventually decided to add the scientist at the end of the Lambda Core-like level, but it was a bit underwhelming. You simply push a button to free her from her prison, and she tells you that she will meet you later, as the escape door is on the other side of the room. To any normal mapper, this is a point in which they would finish development of their map pack, clean it up, make sure there were no game-breaking bugs, and then release it to the public. I would ask you to pause the video and guess what I did next, but I think you already know. "2018 began and I was hard at work making the final boss fight level for Flatline. I decided to set it in a large circular drainage system. Actually, it was inspired by a map called Drain from the Run Think Shoot Live mapping challenge called Chasmville. Chasmville was the very first Ville that I played, and it was the mod that drew my attention to the fact that there was a good community of mappers helping each other out on RTSL. Anyway, my Drain map for Flatline was huge. The main premise was that the player had to take down a helicopter. For some reason, the drain was connected to an underground car park, and there were lots of walkways around the place. I didn't want the player just fighting the helicopter, so I added obstacles and side rooms to explore. The helicopter could not be destroyed until the player had made it right to the top and got the RPG. The last RPG that the player had was taken away at the end of the third map when they were captured by the HECU. Upon destroying the helicopter, it would fall to the bottom of the drain, and then a gate blocking the player's path would conveniently open all by itself. Now all I had to do was place that scientist into the level, fade to black, roll the credits, and go to bed. But that wouldn't be any fun, right? You think the cycle of me adding new maps to the end of the map pack is extravagant? Well, nothing is as extravagant as what I did next. I created an entire map for no reason other than to make the player meet back up with that scientist that they absolutely weren't invested in and had probably forgotten about. This is what I meant earlier when I said that the premise caused a lot of Flatline's problems, but at the time, it made a lot of sense to add a final level to tie it all together. I have to confess, this level is my favourite. It has very little gameplay, but it is very tranquil and calming. There is a nice view out the lobby window, a G-Man sighting, and a nice cafeteria. You finally meet back up with your scientist friend in person after rescuing her from a zombie attack, and then you stand on a balcony whilst watching a monorail tram go past.
I won't ever forget what you've done for me. For us.
This level taught me a great deal about detailing as well as scripting. After it was finished in March of 2018, I had 6 individual completed maps for the map pack. But then, something happened. I did something that would alter the course of my life. I finished Black Mesa Flatline. Yes, Black Mesa Flatline was actually completed. It is playable from start to finish, 6 levels with different combat encounters, puzzles, and environments. So where is it? Why is it not on RunThinkShootLive.com or the Steam Workshop? Well, there was one very small and minor condition that prevented me from releasing it. Remember how earlier I mentioned that I used screens to show the player things that were going on in the world? Well, at that point in early 2018, there was a bug in Black Mesa in which Funk Monitor entities would not display the correct image taken from a point camera. This made the images look really zoomed in. I spent a long time trying to fix it, and then I contacted the developer who said it was a bug deep within their engine that no one could find or fix. I could have released Flatline in the current version of Black Mesa, but I just pictured everyone complaining to me about the bug. Flatline heavily relied on these monitors, and having them distorted and not showing the correct image would confuse everyone. The thing is, I didn't actually need them. I didn't actually need a premise or a scientist friend whom the player was trying to rescue. That part of the pack really didn't add anything to the experience, as the player would never truly be invested in the scientist or even care that much. In fact, I would argue that taking all references to the premise out, including the monitors, would make the maps better, but I was blinded by my obsession with adding a plotline. I then decided that I would wait until the Funk Monitor bug was fixed, and for the next couple of months I worked on Flatline on and off, testing it and improving it. I even showed it to a few people who seemed somewhat impressed by it, but the response was not overwhelmingly good as I expected it would be. Over the next few months, I also went on to make Misnomer, Nostalgiaville Cosmonaut, and eventually Half-Life 2 Cosmonaut, in which I made all of the same mistakes in regards to plot and premise as I did in Flatline. As of writing this video, the Funk Monitor bug has been fixed in the Black Mesa engine. Technically, that means there's nothing preventing me from releasing Black Mesa Flatline. I have considered releasing it in recent times. I have considered overhauling it, changing it, removing the terrible premise, and then putting it on the Steam Workshop. There is something that doesn't seem right about that. Maybe I am scared that releasing it will damage how I think about it. I hold a special place in my memories for Black Mesa Flatline. For many months, it was my life. Any free time available was spent working on it, and when I think back to 2017, it is always one of the first things I think about. Another reason why I may not release it is that, whilst it was the most detailed set of maps I had made up until that point, it doesn't really hold up to my level of mapping today. There are many areas that stick out as being bland and under-detailed. Also, as you may see from the footage of the maps in this video, a lot of things don't look right due to the many updates Black Mesa has received since the maps were first made. Many sounds don't play, and the lighting is often too dark. I would have to go back and fix all the issues and put more effort into detailing the maps, and that could take up more months of my life better spent working on new projects. No, Flatline will remain in my possession for now as a personal achievement as the Black Mesa project that had the most impact of my development as a mapper and showed me that I was capable of creating an entire map pack which was detailed to a better standard than I had previously reached. They say that life is more about the journey than the destination. In Flatline's case, there was no destination. Except here, as I'm telling you about the mistakes I made and the things I achieved behind closed doors. I only worked on one other Black Mesa project in 2018. It was a very unconventional, ambitious and overwhelming project which I will discuss in the next episode of my Black Mesa mapping journey.